know is there is some striking similarity between the cover up with the JFK assassination and the recent assassination attempt on Donald J. Trump. To go through this and other big stories, I have Dr. Jerome Corsi with me. Doctor, thank you so much for joining me today.
Stephen, my great pleasure. Thank you.
So, just some background. You're an author, investigator, writer. You have a podcast, The Truth Central. You have a website, which I'll put down below, The Truth Central. You, sir, are known for being well-versed in the JFK assassination. We're just coming off of this attempted assassination on Donald J. Trump. What are your thoughts on that? And then you had mentioned to me off air some things that are coming out about JFK evidence that I want to hear about. And then do you think there's any correlation between the mystery around this and cover up? Your thoughts on the situation?
Well, my most recent book it was just published in March with David Mantik. It's called The Assassination of John F. Kennedy, the Final Analysis. Dr. Mantik is a MD in physics, a PhD in physics, an MD radiation oncologist. He's seen the JFK X-rays, the skull X-rays from the autopsy in the archives more than anyone else. He did optical density measurements of the X-rays, which is a scientific device where you millimeter by millimeter, sometimes tenth of a millimeter by tenth of a millimeter, measure the light coming through an X-ray. It tells you precisely what you're looking at. Now, Dr. Mantik has determined to publish this data very credibly over years that the three X-rays that exist are all forgeries masking frontal shots. And there's two clear frontal shots you can see. One hit Jack Kennedy, the temporal bone, and blew out the back right of his head. That came from the grassy knoll. Another shot hit at the temple above the right eye, and you can see the bullet trail across the top of the head, which does not exit. So this evidence is unmistakable, and it's been suppressed. Dr. Mantik is a brilliant doctor and physicist, but we wrote this book to make this accessible to the public, very heavily illustrated, over 500 pages, and definitive, and being accepted as definitive of the final analysis of proof that Jack Kennedy was not shot by Lee Harvey Oswald, certainly not as the lone gun assassin. That's the book. You can see we show the three shots that hit the head, one at a low angle from the back, the Daltex building, not the Texas School Book Depository, grassy knoll shot that hit at the right temple and blew out the back of the head, and the blue arrow, the shot at the top of the head with the bullet trail is obvious, largest fragment in the back, which is a frontal shot. This evidence has been available and is widely considered credible. So the similarities are a number. First of all, Dallas was a massive Secret Service failure, negligence failure that almost is so massive it appears willful. The the advanced work to secure the motorcade was not done properly. That was done in a very sloppy fashion, so that buildings downtown that Jack Kennedy was passing, getting into Dealey Plaza, there were windows open. There were people on top of the buildings. When he came into Houston Street, coming into Dealey Plaza, again, there were big buildings, windows open, no security, obvious sniper locations, no one there positioning with law enforcement or Secret Service to secure those locations. Make a sharp right, a left-hand turn onto Elm Street, and you've got to go through the triple underpass. And again, it's a kill zone because you've got obvious shooting angles from the grassy knoll, the south side of Dealey Plaza, above the railroad yard, from the tall buildings, including the Texas School Book Depository. And none of these locations were secured. And these are obvious points where you want to prevent a crossfire. And since the limousine's got to go through, after it turns onto Elm Street, it's got to go through the triple underpass. It's got to pass through this kill zone. And the Secret Service, even at Love Field, was filmed being backed off from its side position along the limousine. The motorcycles were required to stand back of Jack Kennedy. So all these obvious security steps that would be taken if we were trying to prevent an assassination were left open, almost as if they were inviting a kill shot to be taken or setting the stage for a kill zone to be created. It almost looks willful. And then the second thing that's always been a problem is the government cover story does not hold together. So, for instance, Jack Kennedy was brought to Dallas Parkland Hospital immediately from the shooting, and there was a bullet wound in his throat the doctor saw as a puncture wound, an entrance wound. The back right of his head was blown away. It was an obvious exit wound. And the doctors gave a press conference saying Jack Kennedy was shot from the front. But about an hour into the flight back to Andrews Air Force Base with Air Force One, Lee Harvey Oswald was arrested as the assassin. And they said he was doing the shooting from the 6th floor of the Dallas, Texas School Book Depository, which was behind the limousine when the shooting occurred. And we know this because a AP photographer named Alchins took a photograph. Jack Kennedy's hit by the first shot in the throat. His hands are coming up to his throat. And you can see behind him the Texas School Book Depository. So now the government has a body with frontal shots, but a patsy blamed as the killer who had to have shot from the rear. Okay, and then you had 3 cartridges left on the 6th floor sniper's nest, framing Oswald, 3 spent cartridges, 3 shots. But a bystander, James Tague, who was standing on the far side of Dealey Plaza, the south side, was nicked in the cheek by a bullet that missed. So now all the damage done to Kennedy, Connolly had to be done with only 2 shots, all from the rear. So there were real problems with the evidence. People who saw other shooters were ignored. The crime scene was being destroyed almost from the beginning. Clint Hill, the Secret Service agent who ran up to the back of the limousine, managed to get onto the back handhold and climbed onto the footrest just as the 3rd shot hit. And the shot threw Kennedy back into the left. It hit a frame 320 in the Zapruder film. Shot that hit in the temple, blew out the back of his head. Clint Hill was splattered with JFK's brain matter on the left rear side of the limousine. The inboard officer was hit by JFK's brain and matter. And a piece of the Kennedy skull, the Harper fragment, flew onto the lawn on the other side of the grassy knoll. Jackie Kennedy comes out and picks up a piece of Jack Kennedy's brain from the left rear of the trunk. This is clearly a frontal shot from the grassy knoll. And so now the lies begin. So if we go now to Butler, again, the security lapses are enormous. You've got these warehouse buildings, which are in 450 feet of where the stage is going to be, which is ample room for a shot from a high-powered rifle today, an AR-15, and yet they're not secured. You've got a water tower. You've got in the pre-entry, snipers already identified 30 minutes before coming into the grounds. You know, it's seen but not apprehended. Gets lost in the crowd. Shows up again on the roof. They don't hold the event until they find this guy. Let Trump onto the stage. The snipers from the Secret Service acquire the target perhaps several minutes before the shooter is allowed to shoot. And in fact, at least for 3 minutes, they're given instructions not to shoot the sniper until he fires the first shot. Okay, and then there's all kinds of other discrepancies that show up. I mean, the sniper turns out to have foreign accounts, multiple cell phones. Who drove his van? How did he get a ladder in through security? There's a water tower that there may have been a second shooter. You know, one of the FBI high officials is sitting as this woman directly behind Trump. She's filming it. She doesn't look like she's doing anything to stop the assassination. You have Donald Trump's social being shorted the day before the assassination by some knowledgeable sources. You've got Representative Clyburn saying everything's going to change on Sunday. What does he mean by that? Did he have pre-knowledge? So, I mean, it's almost like a pattern of willful, intentional neglect to create the opportunity for a shot to occur. And then when you see the circus that was going on, I mean, first of all, you have Jill Biden requesting the detail that's with Trump usually, and they're all now gone to guard Jill Biden. You've got these women Secret Service agents who appear to be, not particularly well trained. Trump's a big man. These are women who would have a hard time really controlling him. One of them who appears to be certainly LGBT identified and DEI can't even holster her pistol as she's trying to do it. They don't seem to be very well organized or trained. They don't respond immediately. Trump's the one who ducks and puts himself out of danger. And then when the Secret Service gets them, they stand them up. How do you know there's not another shooter? They should be ducking him down and getting him out of there completely out of sight. And can these women really handle someone like Trump? I mean, the entire thing doesn't fit together. Why weren't these warehouse buildings secured? Why wasn't that water tower secured? How did the snipers acquire the target? Why weren't they permitted on their own discretion to take out anyone suspicious? How did this kid get into the yard in what appears to have been kind of, dressed to be an assassin? How did he get his weapon in there? How did he get the ladder in there? Oh, excuse me, I just want to bring my ladder in here so I can climb up to the top of this building and maybe I'll shoot the president. Is that okay? You want to help me with my ladder? So again, there's so many breaches here and so many questions being asked. And every day we're finding out new information that comes out that questions the official narrative. So when the official narrative begins to break down, and again, it did with JFK, 2 shots were all, so now they got to invent the single bullet theory to explain how Kennedy's hit in the back of the head and bullet comes through his neck and then hits Connolly. Well, that's not credible to begin with.
Yeah.
That's kind of a silly idea. It's pristine bullet 399 that has probably less lead missing that was left in Connolly's body, that removed, to save his life. All these discrepancies in the government. The story that fits together is the one we tell in the final analysis. Kennedy was hit from the front. The government had a problem. They knew that. They had a cover story with a lying cover story. The deep state was involved and complicit in the assassination. They had the Secret Service was intentionally stood down, intentionally not allowed to do its job. So a kill zone could be created and the president driven through the kill zone. And then when the evidence of the crime didn't fit the lying story to frame the patsy, the government actually did pre-autopsy surgery of Jack Kennedy's skull to alter the wounds before the autopsy began that night at Bethesda. And that's recorded in the 2 Secret Service agents who attended the autopsy said that there was pre-autopsy surgery. In fact, we documented that very thoroughly in our book, and you can see that before the autopsy began at 8 o'clock that evening, November 22nd, 1963, Jack Kennedy appeared in the morgue at 6:30 that evening in a shipping casket, a body bag. The doctors proceeded to take a surgical saw. The photographs that have emerged from the pre-autopsy surgery, you can actually see the straight line cuts removing the parietal bone, the bone at the top of JFK's skull. And that's an obvious surgery, not a bullet wound. And so therefore, you've got a government that's lying with Jim Carrey Truman Show, because they wanted to kill the president. They killed the president, and now they've got problems with the evidence, so they alter the evidence and lie.
Yeah.
And that's, when this starts, we're today is, we're not even a week from the assassination attempt, and already there's so many holes in the government story that's looking like Swiss cheese. And and you're wondering, this DEI woman who is running it and selecting people by their gender and their race rather than their competence. You want somebody protecting the president of the United States whose first qualification is their excellence with security, not the fact that their gender is the right gender.
Yeah. I'm trying to figure out why a 20-year-old boy would have 3 encrypted international bank accounts. To me, my first thought is, did someone pay him off? My second thought is was this young man being blackmailed for something, and now he's being put up? And then, as you mentioned so articulately, there were 2 really perfect shots through trees to President Trump's head, one from the warehouse, one from the water tower. And now you've got 10 different witnesses, not family members, not friends, just 10 different people coming forward to the authorities saying, we saw someone on the water tower when the shots were happening. And there's even a kind of a grainy video of a shadow coming around. The shots are heard and then it disappears. I don't know. What are your thoughts on the international bank accounts, all of that?
Well, again, it doesn't fit together. I mean, Lee Harvey Oswald had an intelligence background. He defected to Russia, but it appears to have been, now from what we now know, he was being tracked by the CIA. He was probably in the defector program that they're running in that period of the 1960s to try to get intelligence out of Russia. And so therefore he was probably an operative. That's probably what we'll find out in the documents that have yet to be released. But the point is that Lee Harvey Oswald was known to the CIA. He wasn't some lone nut case that was a nobody that was trying to kill the president to make something out of himself. There was no real good explanation of why he wanted to kill Kennedy. He had a history of hating Kennedy. And so therefore the framing of the situation didn't make sense. Oswald comes to a Texas school book depository to get extracted. In the middle of the day, it's almost empty. He sits next to somebody, nothing happens. He moves, sits next to the next guy. It's almost like he was looking for a contact to get out of there. And so all of this behavior is not consistent with him being the lone gun assassin, but makes him more of what he said he was a patsy. Well, in this case, we don't know anything about this kid because, like Oswald, he was killed. And so, but all the facts we're finding out don't tie together very neatly, because where did he get the ladder? Who drove the van there? How did he get up on that roof? That roof supposedly had agents inside the building. Why weren't they hearing somebody up? It was said, first of all, well, we didn't have an agent up there because it was too steep an angle on that roof. Well, that's ridiculous. You can certainly secure an agent up there. It wasn't too steep an angle for the shooter. And, what's a top FBI official doing sitting immediately behind Trump, dispassionately filming and not reacting, not trying to stop the assassination?
What was she trying to get the view from behind? Boom.
I mean, it's like, did she know in advance this was going on? Is that why she was sitting there? You don't usually have Secret Service or FBI agents taking up prestige seats in a rally. Did anybody know she was an FBI agent? She was identified later. And so all of these aspects of it make you think it was intentionally willful negligence that they saw kill sites that were potential that should have been secured and put into the perimeter, a security perimeter, not excluded from the security perimeter and ignored, which is what happened. You got snipers who were evidently very capable of killing this kid or whomever, and they're told to stand down until the sniper shoots. I mean, let the sniper take the first shot. That doesn't make it. And they let the president go on stage when you've got all these indications that somebody is there who doesn't belong there. So it's the whole thing doesn't fit together. So when the government story starts collapsing immediately, and you can begin seeing this in many of the things, these, we're coming to the realization, I think, increasingly that the government lies. And the government's into these lying memes, these lying narratives. So, we're watching 9/11 and somebody's being interviewed on tape and building 7 goes down behind the person being interviewed and it hasn't been hit by an airplane. Well, how did that happen? We send all the U.S. troops to Iraq in 1991 because Colin Powell says Saddam Hussein's got weapons of mass destruction. Well, why didn't we find any? We got a bad flu in 2021 that is made into a pandemic. Doesn't seem to have mortality figures greater than normal flus. We get a vaccine that doesn't prevent you from getting the disease. In fact, may itself be dangerous. And again, we're all told it's safe, effective, proven, reliable. So, the government lies, and this deep state desire for power and hatred of Trump is similar to the hatred the military-industrial complex had towards JFK, who did not want to go to war in the Berlin Missile Crisis. He said he worked on a solution with Khrushchev that did not involve war, and he engaged in the test ban treaty to get peaceful coexistence with Russia. And Curtis LeMay and the military wanted to go to war in the Cuban Missile Crisis. They wanted to go to war in Vietnam. Kennedy had signed an order we were not going to war in Vietnam. That was not in their plans. So all these things show that the deep state has been in control, and that they decided to kill a president or a presidential candidate, and they have control over these agencies like this Secret Service, and can create a intelligence operation, black operation, and lie about it and get away with it with a press that won't investigate. We're in a very dangerous situation.
Yeah. Let me throw something out to you, Doctor, that I read just this morning.
Yes.
1/3 of all Democrat Americans believe Trump faked this assassination, that the whole thing from start to finish was staged in order to get sympathy votes.
Well, there's what they call in psychology a confirmation bias. In other words, you tend to believe a story which reinforces your prior belief. So if they hate Trump, they have to assume that Trump is engineering his own assassination attempt. And that story makes sense, even though it's logically ridiculous. I mean, what is he, puncture his ear his ear was bleeding when he went up to touch it. He didn't do anything to cause that ear to be bleeding. So did he have somebody off stage who was trained just to hit him in the ear so it would bleed, and then he's going to fall to the ground? Now he's got a staged event. It just doesn't make sense. It's an hysterical psychological attempt to refuse to accept evidence that's obvious in front of you. I mean, there's even one of the very high speed photographs that shows the bullet coming at Trump. And it's clear that in turning his head the way he turned it, it clipped his ear. And the reaction is not a staged reaction. Trump is in pain. He feels the ear's got blood. He gets down. I mean, this is not the way you are acting if you're staging your own attempted assassination. And besides, who would do that? I mean, you stage an assassination where you might actually get killed. actually firing bullets, or is this all just are they assuming this is just, they're the ones who are assuming that the narrative is a false narrative created to favor Trump? So this is an act, it's a show. Well, the act and show may be on the part of the deep state, not on the part of Trump himself. And certainly all the reactions of Trump, the people who were there, killing of a bystander, the fire officer, two others seriously wounded. There was shooting, and there were people killed. One guy was killed from the shooting. Two others were seriously injured. Trump was injured. You can hear the flurry of shots. Evidently, a sniper took out the shooter on the roof with one shot at a good distance. Well, that could, why did he do that earlier? So all these things don't add up. And certainly is not adding up to say it was a staged event that Trump did to gain sympathy. That's
if you were gonna do that, wouldn't you say, hey, don't shoot me in the head, shoot my shoulder, shoot my arm, right, I'm a big guy. I'm literally like 6'4". I'm not a small person.
Right.
Shoot and don't shoot the shoulder by the heart.
Right.
Shoot the shoulder or something, but aim for the back of my head and I'll move just at the last minute like a magician.
It's ridiculous. The shot hitting your ear is within a quarter of an inch of going right through your brain. It was a miracle that he wasn't killed.
I like how they went from, dang, we're sorry they missed, to he faked it.
Yeah,
that was in 24 hours they shifted.
Well, it's this hate Trump syndrome is irrational and is not based in any foundation of who Trump is, and any event that occurs is interpreted to be negative to Trump, and assuming that Trump is, not who he says he is, that he's staging things for effect, that he's really a tyrant, he's really all these horrible things they've said about Trump, which do not have to, they don't have to have a basis in reality to a true believer. A true believer is prepared to accept the information that reinforces what they already believe. And that's where the divisions in the country are so strong that, they prefer to have a president who is obviously suffering signs of senior dementia, whether it's, a disease or whether it's just senior dementia, perhaps it's Parkinson's, we don't know yet, but it's clear that Joe Biden, this is like the Democrats are almost saying they'd like to have a weekend with Bernie president. The guy's dead, but you can reactivate him through AI and make him look like he's alive and have him say what you want to say. So I guess for Obama, who would want a third term, this would be the perfect president. So, these are these things that you can concoct on either side. Now, what's real is that Biden is suffering a mental incapacity. And what's real is that there was shooting going on in Butler, Pennsylvania. People were killed and injured. And that shooting is not a staged event. This is not a Shakespeare play where Caesar pretended to be killed. This was an attempt to kill Caesar. Yeah. And it is obvious that that's what it was. But the fact is that it doesn't fit together. And when it doesn't fit together, as an investigator, at least there's a lie. I might not know what the lie is to start with. You might not know who's lying or why. But when the government starts putting out information that is this easily questioned or discredited, so the people standing in the field saying, there's a shooter up there. Well, I don't know why they just didn't run over there and try to catch him themselves, or try to get authorities to do it, rather than just cause a commotion. Why, until all these issues were settled, they didn't say this to Trump, we're going to wait a few minutes here to put you on stage until we get this situation under control. There may be a shooter loose here. There's a suspect here we have identified that we don't want in this crowd. Till we find that person, you're not going anywhere right now.
Yeah.
And by the way, we don't have this junior varsity team of women who were not particularly experienced presidential details be the ones responsible for saving Donald Trump's life. I mean, they're bumbling around or running into each other. I mean, they couldn't grab a hold of Donald Trump. They couldn't holster their weapons. I mean, they looked more like they were concerned about their appearance and the fact that they were Secret Service agents and that they were truly competent to do security details. And, I'm not saying everybody who's a successful Secret Service agent has to look like a big burly guy who's a tough guy. And, that may not be the right person either, but there are certain characteristics you're going to have if you're going to be in security. And being a woman may be a detriment just given size and strength. And these are realities. But now, again, perhaps differences between men and women are like overlapping normal distributions. You could probably find some women who do quite well as Secret Service, but they're going to be in the extreme end of how women are physically in terms of to have the strength and the stamina and the ability to do this kind of rigorous duty. And for men, there's going to be much more towards the normal end of the scale. They're just physical realities. And then there's also the reality of you don't put the B team on the president.
Yeah.
He is a former president, not just a candidate. And, Jill Biden is admittedly the first lady, but she's not nearly in the same category of security importance than a former president who's a current candidate. And why would you shift the security team at the last minute away from Trump?
Yeah.
So, especially with the history, and I mean, the timing in my Kennedy book, which is raising these issues in JFK, and making it abundantly clear that this was a massive Secret Service failure. And then we have Butler, PA, and it's another massive, there's no way the Secret Service comes out of this looking good.
Yeah.
They didn't do their job. They acted like Keystone Cops. They're giving orders that are incomprehensible. They're not securing a perimeter which is obviously needed of being secured. And so therefore, the temptation to think this is willful and trying to create an opportunity for kill zone is something that now suddenly we can't say it's that way for certain. We can say now it certainly merits investigation.
Yeah, I agree. Let me switch gears with you. It's come out that as soon as Sunday, Joe Biden may be stepping away from his reelection campaign, that he would step down, return his delegates, call for the DNC to host mini debates, like a mini, everybody gets to show their best side. But I'm also reading that he has no plans of endorsing Kamala Harris, which I believe may irritate a large block of their voters. What are your thoughts on this? Do you have any info that he might be stepping down?
Well, I mean, it's certainly being rumored and pushed, including by Nancy Pelosi indirectly. If you listen to Biden, he's saying that he wants to run even more intensely, having heard Trump's acceptance speech. So Biden is not signaling this. It's people around him who are signaling that they know that he's going to step down, but I don't think anybody's told Biden he's going to step down, certainly not from what Biden's saying. And Biden, his inner core is strongly supportive. Biden, I think, may be delusional, but he thinks he can still beat Trump. And the Democrats have a problem. If you remember in 1972, when George McGovern was nominated for president during the Vietnam War, and he picked Thomas Eagleton, for his running mate, very successfully thought this was going to be a great running mate. Well, it comes out a couple of days later that Thomas Eagleton had shock therapy. So they have to replace him. They have a mini convention. They get Sergeant Shriver to be the new running mate for McCarthy, and it's chaos. This shifting in the middle, this deciding the campaign's already that suddenly, well, we don't want Biden anymore. Well, the campaign's already in disarray. And secondly, what they're worried about, let's just look at different scenarios. One is that they don't want to lose. They're willing to have their campaign be a train wreck and try to get it back on the tracks, which is hard to do. And so therefore, there's different scenarios. He may not resign tomorrow or this weekend. He might resign at the convention. They might say, well, let's have a slate of candidates. Okay, there's lots of different options. But if Biden is not complicit in this, if they don't get him to agree, they're going to have to use the 25th Amendment, and then Kamala is president. Now, that's another problem, and they don't really want Kamala going into the convention as president. They'd rather have Biden, I think, say, I'll step down at the convention, and then you can have a slate of people, and you can decide, who you want to be the candidate. Now, Michelle Obama would probably be the strongest contender, but does Michelle want to risk her political future if she thinks she has one on a campaign that's in this much disarray? We've got questions, is Biden going to release the money? How do you reorganize the campaign theme? You've got all these things printed that say Biden, Harris. We're going to throw those all out, and we're going to print new ones? How are we going to message and explain this to the people? This again, they say, well, suddenly everybody's going to forget about Biden and just jump with enthusiasm on Hillary or on Michelle or Newsom. I mean, that's a long shot. These people have not been vetted this time around. They didn't go through primaries. We don't know whether Michelle really has an appetite for this. She says she doesn't. Now, whether that's because she just wants to be, acclamation, please, Michelle, you've got to save the party. We don't know what her strategy is. But whomever steps into this role is taking a risk. Now, another scenario, let's say the Democrats plan to steal the election. That I'm not saying they stole 2020. I'm just saying they're planning that, they can have a few extra votes if they need it. Well, if Biden is so distant in the polling, and you are planning to do voting fraud, I'm not saying they are, but let's just run the scenarios hypothetical, where you don't want Biden with this much of a disparity in the polls from Trump, because nobody's going to believe he just surged at the end. So you got to have a candidate who can poll better in order to pull off anything you're planning to do at the end. So there are nefarious forces within the Democratic Party willing to do this. They're going to want to replace Biden now. But yet you've got to convince Michelle that it's worth the risk. She could, run all chances she has in the future by stepping in here when, the play's coming into the final act and you haven't even introduced yourself on stage in this round. You're betting on your celebrity status. Just so, we all want Michelle and acclamation. And now look, it took Obama a long time to build his star status. He started in 2004 with giving one of the early speeches endorsing John Kerry at the 2004 Democratic Convention in Massachusetts, where he said, we're all Americans. We're not not the Black Americans. We're all Americans. And that began to set his stage as a unifier, the image they created for Obama, which I think was totally a lie and manufacturer. I think he was always a Marxist. I've written about that when I wrote the book, The Obama Nation, in 2008. But the point is, a lot of politics are optics. The Democrats right now are way behind on the optics. And they're going to have a convention which is not a united front, which could be a convention in which the public gets to see them all argue with each other. And they come out of the convention with the losers hating the winners. and then trying to go forward running a campaign. And they've got bad messaging to begin with, because even if they get rid of Biden, we've got a war raging. Trump's acceptance speech was very effective in saying, I left a world of peace, we got a world of war. Got Ukraine at war, it could become a expanded direct war with Russia, it could become nuclear. We've got Gaza and the Hamas, Hezbollah in the wings, Taiwan, China going to move on Taiwan. The economy, despite Bidenomics, people are suffering from inflation. The middle class is getting pounded. People know this. We've got millions of immigrants in here who are taking the jobs, and we're not assimilating them very fast. I mean, every policy that EVs, electric vehicles, well, the cars showrooms are filled with EVs that nobody wants. They built like 7 plug-in stations. They didn't build 250,000 of them. So the whole thing, every one of the policies that the Bidens tried to implement turned out to be a disaster. Green New Deal. We spent trillions of dollars on green energy, and we're still using hydrocarbon fuels. And the prospect of us doing this energy transition with net zero is going to cost trillions of dollars. We're getting our kids to say, well, they want sex change operations before they reach puberty, which means they're never going to have an orgasm and they're not going to produce babies. And mothers and fathers are going to say, well, that's okay with me. We've got this gender madness with, transgenders and story hours. Well, millions of people are saying this is insanity. And again, the Democrats have produced division. They've produced economic difficulty. They produced war, whereas Trump has a record of having produced economic prosperity. He left a peaceful world. We had the Abraham agreements. It looked like the Middle East was actually settling down. And we had employment. We were producing self-sufficient energy. We were securing the border. The cities were safe. Today we've got potential bankruptcy in these cities. These cities are bedlam. And we defunded the police. So you got, chaos over here when you look at the Democrats. And when you look at the Republicans, you've got a future that people were saying, I may not like Donald Trump, but that wasn't so bad. Maybe I misevaluated Donald Trump. Got blacks and Latinos saying, we're Trumpers. At least we had jobs. They weren't giving them to the immigrants who just got here. And, the voting is a mess. How many illegals are we going to let to vote? And people are just going to sit back and say, that's okay.
Yeah.
Okay. So the country right now, if you go by presidential elections, if the party in power is faced with war, economic difficulties, insecurity in domestic tranquility in terms of police and safety, these are the kind of big picture indicators that they're going to lose, because those are hard obstacles to overcome no matter who your candidate is. And these last minute changes with an assassination attempt that failed, looks like the hand of God's on Trump, which he's proclaiming, and I think with some reasonable belief, sounds reasonable to me. I mean, I have no explanation for why he turned his head at that last minute. A shot that was headed towards his head didn't kill him.
Even Biden asked him that. Why did you turn your head?
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, he didn't know. He was turning to look at a jumbotron of immigration figures from when he was president, and he wanted to read off the chart. Well, he doesn't normally do that in his speech, but he had the impulse to do it at just the right minute.
Yeah.
Okay, so how do you explain these things? But the overall presidential politic dynamics are bad for the Democrats right now. But I'm saying, again, don't count them out, because there's lots of things that we're just still in July. We've still got a baseball playoff seasons and a World Series to go through. We've got a lot of things going to happen in this country, in this world, before we vote. And, things are going to look differently in November than they look today. We have another pandemic coming along. I mean, I'm recovering again from a second bout of COVID, which you can hear from me coughing and the like. And it was much more severe. And so therefore, we could have another pandemic.
Yeah.
But at the moment, I don't see an easy strategy for the Democrats to get rid of Biden because he doesn't want to go. And I see Trump coming out of one of the most successful conventions in modern history, with the Democrats going into one that's going to be one of the most contentious in recent history, with the prospect of protesters for Hamas and all kinds of other distractions going on, while the hall is a mess. I mean, if you remember 1968, the Democratic National Convention, where Hubert Humphrey came out of it. Well, the convention was such a mess that the campaign was a mess, and Nixon again came out of nowhere with a surprise victory to win with his Southern strategy. So again, I think this is one of our most contentious and difficult periods of human history in the United States history, and human history, because so much is at stake in terms of the economic future. Got depopulationist agendas being articulated by the World Economic Forum. We've got mass surveillance technologies that could be limiting our freedoms. And we've got Donald Trump proclaiming Make America Great Again, which I think is going to appeal to the vast majority of Americans, but it's going to drive a certain amount of these neo-Marxists insane.
Yeah. Oh gosh. Tell me about your new book, The Anti-Globalist Manifesto: Ending the War on Humanity. What's that book going to be about?
Well, the book is about exactly what we're talking about. I've formed an anti-globalist alliance, and we're forming one in Europe, and it's going to be published by Steve Bannon.
Okay.
And I'm saying that we're really into a spiritual war here, that the transhumanists, the World Economic Forum, and people like Noah Harari, who's writing books about Deus Homo, God man, is saying we're entering a post-human era where we can merge, a select group of very advanced human beings with machines, and we can create transhumans. And the vast majority of human beings are using too many resources. So therefore, if we merge ourselves with machines and become transhuman, like gods, we can extend our lives perpetually and have all we need of the resources of the earth, and we can eliminate billions of people and let the machines do the work, robots and AI. Well, this is, again, another Garden of Eden fantasy that, God doesn't exist. We can eliminate all these people. They don't have human rights. Harari says you cut a person open, you can see the lungs and the heart, but you don't find human rights. That's a myth. That's a narrative. And they have no regard for human beings. So therefore, they self-appoint to work with the multinational corporations to live a life of luxury for themselves, thinking that they've become gods, but having no real inherent values that are rooted in any traditional respect for life. It's a very, very dangerous way of thinking. So I'm saying that the majority of people don't want to be eliminated. They don't want to be starved to death. They don't want to be killed in a nuclear war. They don't want their children made into freaks. They want to live their lives normally and peacefully. The book is the final analysis, and I think Jack Kennedy had it right. It comes from a speech that he gave at American University just before he died, when he said to the world and to Khrushchev, we all live in this small planet. We all breathe the same air. We all cherish our children and grandchildren, and we're all mortal. So we better figure out a way to coexist. We don't need to be killing each other. We don't need to be having perpetual wars, which only benefit the arms manufacturers and the bankers. So it begins to validate this, elite, cabal that wants to take over the world and enslave all of us again. which is a redo of the Garden of Eden. It's a redo of the feudal system. It's a redo of a small group of people having power. It reminds you of the Nazis, self-appointed mad oligarchs working with the multinational corporations and being funded by Wall Street. In fact, the Bush family, Prescott Bush and Allen Dulles, his brother Prescott, John Foster Dulles, being Secretary of State under Eisenhower, and when Dulles was running the CIA, they funded Hitler through Wall Street before World War II. They've always had this dream that humanity is dispensable and they can be transhuman and we can just be Ubermensch, as Nietzsche said. It's a very, very dangerous mind virus, and it's atheistic, anti-God at its heart. It's almost satanic, and it worships death. It worships abortion. We don't need these babies. There's too many babies. They're unwanted. Well, only God can give life. And when you lose the consciousness of spirituality in a human beings tend to become very bestial. Even Aldous Huxley said we're the only species that is capable of designing genocidal plans for our own species. Chimpanzees may kill a chimpanzee, but they don't plan to kill all the chimpanzees except the ones they like.
Yeah.
But human beings can do that. Yeah. Or another ancient saying is, human beings are the wolf to human beings. We'll attack our own species. And it's a very, very dangerous human trait. And when human beings lose spirituality, they very quickly descend into this bestial nature. And genocides result. We see mass wars result. You begin to think, General Smedley Butler between World War I and II was right when he said war is a racket. We all go believing we're doing a patriotic thing. We're just believing some lie the government told us. And the only winners are the bankers and the arms dealers. Well, again, that's who's winning. Money goes to corrupt Ukraine. And the Biden family stolen all this money, but yet they're CIA operatives. The CIA is running the drug trade and the child trade. I caught the CIA with, working with the HSBC and money laundering in 2011. They were money laundering for the drug cartels in Mexico. They're taking people's former customers' bank accounts and running millions of dollars through those accounts. And they're laundering money for the drug cartels. They got fined $1.9 billion. Nobody went to jail. We've been running the drug businesses, the child slavery businesses. There are intelligence agencies. The government's involved in very evil activities, which then suddenly validate conspiracy theories where you say, well, they just decided one day to kill Jack Kennedy and get away with it. Well, maybe they decided one day to kill Donald Trump and get away with it. They just missed by inches, by less than an inch. So again, when we see these things happen and it becomes clear that we have the ability to be living in a Jim Carrey Truman Show, we think we're experiencing reality. We're doing nothing but experiencing a psychological operation designed to enslave us. We begin to wake up. And I think that's what's happening in the world. And so the Anti-Globalist Alliance is designed to return to communities, get energy back into the control of communities, get food back in the control of communities, schools, and to stop the multinational corporations from demanding that people live in 15-minute cities with cell phones that can be turned off so their digital currency disappears.
Wow. Okay, I'm gonna put a link down below to that, and in fact to all of your books, but that one specifically. Final question for you, Doctor, and then I'll get you out on this. President Trump seems very genuine about wanting to end the Russia-Ukraine war. Do you think he'll actually be able to do it?
Oh, I think so, very easily. I think we're the provocateurs. I mean, the Ukraine war goes back to 2013 when Hillary Clinton was Secretary of State. with a private email server, and Bill Clinton was running the Clinton Foundation. They were taking money from Pinochet, who was a oligarch in Ukraine, who wanted to get Ukraine into NATO so he could do business with the West. They took his money, promoted that idea. The Democratic Party has been in love with Russia since 1917. Of course, when the Berlin Wall came down and Russia renounced communism, Democrats decided we ought to go to war with Russia. And, we had the color revolution that was designed by Soros to destabilize Ukraine, and that wasn't good enough. So we did the Maidan rebellion. We overthrew Yanukovych, who was really, Russian-oriented president, but duly elected. And Putin saying there's these two provinces in the east in Ukraine which have been historically Russian-speaking. And they've been aligned as independent federations, closely aligned to Russia. The west, where Zelensky is, was always aligned with Poland and Germany. In World War II, they're neo-Nazi. We still have neo-Nazi brigades fighting for Zelensky. They're doing cocaine in the president's office. They're running money through there, and the CIA is keeping it open as a money laundering center. And they're talking about sending in, French troops with long-range missiles to attack Russia. Well, Putin's being very restrained. He said repeatedly, I'll stop this war. Just let these two provinces be independent. And instead, Poroshenko and then Zelensky start sending in, the army from Ukraine and these neo-Nazi brigades to kill the Russians in these two provinces, to make these two provinces part of Ukraine, German allied. Well, that's violating 1,000 years of history. And Putin's saying, I'm not going to put up with it. These are Russians, and I'm going to protect the Russians. And these are my access to the Black Sea, which is the access to the Mediterranean, and my access to the Atlantic from the south. I've got geopolitical reasons for wanting bases in Sevastopol on Black Sea. So everything we're doing is provocative. And it's almost like the Biden administration wants a nuclear war.
All right. This has been a fascinating discussion. I definitely want to have you back on the show. If people want to follow you, is the truthcentral.com, is that the best place for them to read and listen to your show?
Yes, I'm doing a weekday podcast on thetruthcentral.com. And of course, my books are on Amazon. The Assassination of JFK, The Final Analysis is my current book published in March. And the anti-globalist manifesto, The War to End Humanity, will be published by Steve Bannon as a war room book the fall before the election.
Okay, great. Well, thank you so much for coming on. I look forward to having you on again, and I hope you have a great rest of your day.
My great pleasure. Thank you very much, Steve.